this segment talks about really the building the foundation around utilizing Islamic finance to finance the gap we see in infrastructure across Africa. I mean, it's estimated that Africa needs $100 billion to close the gap. And if you just oppose that on the SDG goals, then it moves up to 181 billion to 221 billion US dollars. Now, so this gap is real, and Islamic finance can actually assist in closing the gap. We've also seen from the keynote address that we heard, just from a common sense approach, we should be able to also democratize the opportunities and allow inclusiveness to prevail. And then the other keynote speaker by the AFC CEO did talk around what Islamic finance is. It's asset-backed, and it provides an opportunity to grow the economy. I mean, providing power, according to the speech, provides a $1 trillion economy, and if we go into import substitution, that's another $1 trillion economy. So the aspiration of the government around a $1 trillion economy can greatly be assisted by Islamic finance. So that said, this panel of experts will be looking really how do we bring this home in terms of the involvement of Islamic finance to close the gap that we find in agriculture. I'd like to start first with the chairman of NGS Group, who is very vast in this area and the capital market, because the capital market does play a great role in mobilizing capital. So from a capital market standpoint, what role can exchanges like NGX play to developing and listing Sharia compliant products that appeal to both institutional and retail investors?
Thank you very much, Jude, my CEO. For people that have background about the NGX, I should be the one asking Jude instead of Jude asking me, because my CEO is the one handling the job. For us, we are at the board. But that notwithstanding, I will try to answer the question. We at NGX, we took deliberate steps to strengthen non-interest finance ecosystem by establishing what we call non-interest finance board. This board is a dedicated platform for the listing, trading, promotion of Islamic finance products. And what we have done at NGS, in order to deepen the Islamic finance, we collaborated with the regulators, our regulator, the apex regulator, SEC, PENCOM, NICOM, to see how we can be able to partner with them so that we can have more of these non-interest, ethical, non-interest, Sharia compliance products in our capital market. But as an exchange, we in NGS, we provide the platforms. Those platforms are what we use in listing those products. And what we use to market those platforms to companies, entrepreneurs that can be able to come, if they meet up with the requirement, to come and be listed on our NGX. The actual responsibility of listing those Islamic finance products, instruments, rests with our operators. When I was a director with the first Islamic bank in Nigeria, Ajayi Bank, I presented and convinced other directors the benefits, the advantages of being listed on an exchange. And at the end of the day, I packaged and brought Ajayi Bank to the NGX. We listed that organization, that bank at par. Today, the same bank is 10 times the price we have listed it, which have demonstrated the value addition and the acceptability. So, coming back to your question, why we provide those platforms, I want to first of all single out Hajara of Lotus for what she have done, because what we do, we usually brought the boss, the indices. The first NGX Islamic Finance Index was listed through Hajara as Lotus, why we call it NGS Lotus Finance Index. Before the coming of the Jaiz Bank, even before the coming of the Skook, which, if you can recall, the first Skook came from through Ocean State, which was oversubscribed. And all the 7 series of the Nigerian Skook were all oversubscribed. So coming back to the question, I want to use this opportunity to challenge our professionals that are here, that I have seen today, including the organizers of this conference, Metropolitan, the 117 Capital, the Marble Capital, and to mention some few names. Tunde is here. I have seen him. I have seen Akim and the rest. What can we do? Because I'm wearing 2 caps. Being the chairman of the NGS, I'm the CEO of an investment bank, Finmal Finance. We are the one that packaged abroad Jaiz Bank. And I believe this conference should not finish by us not bringing other Islamic banks that have followed Jaiz Bank. We have the Taj Bank, we have the Lotus, we have the Summit Bank now, and we have so many takafus. What can we be able to do as professionals, as capital market operators, so that we can bring those organizations, so that we can bring those instruments, so that we can deepen the Nigerian capital market? For us at NGS, we want to consider, and part of our target, to have NGS as a hub of Islamic finance, not only in West Africa, but Africa. We believe we can be able to achieve that. We have the resources, both human and material. We have invested so much in technology. And I believe for us in NGS, it's an opportunity that we have seen. Globally, we have seen how Islamic finance has grown, and we can be able to achieve that. So, the chairman of this panel, I want to use this opportunity to say the challenge is to all of us. Let's see how to come and deepen this. For us at NGS, we have provided a platform. We are set on a board. We have collaborated with all the regulators. We have the professionals, the capital market operators that are well-trained, well-versed, that we can be able to deepen this market. With a population of over 200 million, with what you have said at $1 trillion economy, we believe it's achievable, and we can be able to achieve that with the support of the operators and this type of conference that can be able to at least showcase and give awareness to these Islamic products and instruments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Kwairanga. As you're aware, I mean, if you think about the African context of Islamic finance, I mean, the figure is somewhere around 1.2 trillion. And if you look at the global Islamic finance space is in the region of 3 to 4 trillion US dollars. Then bringing it home to Nigeria, it's 4 billion US dollars, and the Sukuk constitutes 54%, while the traditional Islamic non-interest banking is 45 billion. And Dr. Kwairanga has clearly stated how the capital market helps, especially around products, mentioning the Lotus Index, NGX Index, and also Jaiz Bank listing on the exchange, so encouraging more corporates. And we did hear from our keynote speaker talking around the boldness, the courage to grow big Islamic finance banks in the region of Access and the rest. And so bringing it now, just from a legal perspective, I'll be going to Professor Ajayi to just tell us really from a legal perspective, what are the frameworks, reforms that you think Africa should be adopting to improve Islamic finance as it pertains to infrastructure financing across Africa?
Thank you. I think, as you know, law is all over our lives and is therefore philosophical. And so, in talking of legal frameworks, with respect to Africa as a whole, the thing to understand is to ask ourselves first, what is this about? And I think, as the Emir said, it's about patient, ethical, impactful finance. Patient, ethical, impactful finance based, as he said, on common sense. And so I think that's the very first thing to underscore, and it goes to what the chairman of NGX also just mentioned. And so in terms of framework, it's understanding what then is patient, what is ethical, and what is impactful. So a fundamental principle is that you don't put money in things that are intangible, things that you cannot touch. And so it's asset-based, as the Emir and the president of AFC mentioned. So we're looking at things that are asset-based. That's what the finance. Things that would have impact on the people. Now, whether we'll go all the way the Emir went, which is that it should also be about things like gender equality, which I strongly believe in. I was going to take on the president of AFC on whether he does that. But it's looking at those things and what is it in law that you require to do those things. The first thing, therefore, is that, please, I think, as I was mentioning to one of the leaders in this field today, mentioned by the chairman of NGX, is Hajara Adiola. She is absolutely outstanding in pushing, and I told her she has a challenge. She's not successful yet, although she thinks she is, with her bank and what is done at Kamik, getting tax exemptions for Sukuk, doing the listing, until she begins to replicate herself. Mr. Chairman, the market will not see what it is looking for, which is product and liquidity. Law is not going to create liquidity. Law is not going to create the market. Law is not going to create the product. I'm trying to break this down at the end of the day. We have the enabling environment in Nigeria. NGX has created a platform. The SEC, has a platform for it. The Banking Act recognizes it. The taxman has done what it can do. So there's nothing that needs to be done for it in law in Nigeria. Now, in other African countries, there's some things to be done. The concept of trust, for instance, comes into this form of banking, and there are some African countries, especially the civil law countries, where the concept of trust is alien. Okay? So for those African countries, they would need to see how they can tweak their laws to recognize trust. And so taking this slightly further, what I think we begin to need to look at is, as the chairman said, where are those that will make the market? But it is you and me. Now, he was in Ajayi's bank. So I should ask him, why is Ajayi's bank, as old as it is, not as big as Access Bank when they are about the same age? Why? Why is it that the large population, let's break it down, of Muslims have not gone to this market? And why is it that they have continued to borrow money from the conventional markets and invest in the conventional markets and not this? The law is not standing in the way of that. And we need to break these things down. So constitutionally, Nigeria is a state. We separate religion and the state. And we need to separate this thing fully from religion in as much as it is based on religious principles. Some of the problems that we have is under the instructions of the former Emma, as the CBN governor, wrote the first set of rules for banks to do non-interest banking. And people were like, how can you do that? You're a priest, you're a Christian. I said, what's the problem? So there is a mindset, and this is some of the things that I think we need to do. We need to educate ourselves that the fact that I do non-interest banking does not mean anything to me as a person. And it is essential, therefore, that we begin to see how we project this form of alternative finance that does those things that are best for us. If you are borrowing money from somebody that is not going to take your house from you, is not going to call you a debtor, and is not going to mess you up. If you are giving money, you are giving money into something where you are going to make money and you are also creating impact. And human beings, all of us, whether Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, animist, we all like to have impact. So coming back to the central thing, in Nigeria, we've done quite a lot. What needs to be done is for the professionals to go out, is for SEC and NGX to begin looking at a better licensing regime for people, for professionals that are doing these things, which will kind of begin to develop specialization. And I know that I am a true expert. Because some of the problems is that some of us that say we do these things don't understand the principles. And when it then goes to the Sharia Council, you may find out that the product that you have designed will fail. So we need to make sure that people are licensed, and that will help the market know that there are real experts that are licensed to do these things and can advise you in a fashion that will meet the fundamental principles of this form of finance and also meet the law, bearing in mind that today and in many parts of the world, especially when it's international, you have Sharia principles mixing with common law principles. The basic law elements still come into a non-interest insurance product or non-interest finance product. There will still be the question of, if you breach the contract and I go to court or arbitration, how will it be resolved? I must make sure that the man that is resolving the dispute understands the principles. And so this is where we begin to get to the critical factor of what the law must do. We need to make sure that we develop a system that has understanding of the fundamental principles. You don't want to go before a man who is vast in Sharia law, but then he has mixed it with culture, as the Emma said. And instead of doing pure Sharia law, he's actually pushing his culture. And so maybe let me stop here because I know we don't have a lot of time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Professor. I like the angle. The law will not develop the market. It's still left to the capital market to find people, develop those people, and scale up. The law will just provide a framework to ensure that the knowledge and the knowledgeable people are the ones mediating around disputes. Now, Africa's, for those just joining, this is really the foundation of how we can use Islamic finance to finance the infrastructural gap that we find across Africa. And that gap is estimated at $200 billion, and largely because it is 95% funded by the public sector. In his keynote speech by Dr. Fasua. He did talk around the government's partnership drive. And we also heard from the CEO of AFC. He talked about Islamic finance being a perfect uh, match for infrastructure funding, largely because it's asset backed and there's partnerships. So, Dr. Fasua, this is really for you from a government perspective. What sort of partnership frameworks should the private sector be looking to have to increase their stake in financing the gap that we find across Africa?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman of this panel, for that question, and also to the organizers of the event for inviting me up here impromptu. I was actually planning my escape when they called me up. But I mean, thanks for the question. The first thing I'd like to note is that I think Africa's infrastructure gap is a whole lot larger than 200, 300 billion dollars. Indeed, I think it's in the trillions of dollars. Nigeria alone will swallow that $300 billion, honestly. If we actually want to plan our infrastructure to be able to improve people's standard of living. Imagine every state having a metro system to transport people around. Imagine those metros being linked to a national rail system that goes everywhere in Nigeria and also into Africa. I mean, you take a train. I mean, the last time I went to France from Britain using the Euro channel, or what they call it. And you could do that in all of Europe. There was one documentary I once watched on a flight, a guy called Cockney Reg. And Cockney Reg was a black cab driver in London. And some guys approached him, gave him 10,000 pounds and say, take us to where this stops, right? And actually, that 10,000 pounds did not end until Morocco. But he was able to move from London into France, into Italy, into Germany, into Portugal, and there was no one stopping him. And I realized the problem we have in Africa. Because Europe that came to split Africa in all forms and shapes and carve us up has ensured that they themselves have no borders and nobody disturbing anybody. And of course, he even went across the water into Morocco, and they still have a bit of change to give, and that's black cab. That's very, very expensive. Now, if you take the black cab now, for some of us, you say, take me to where £5 ends, because the thing is sticking 20 cents, 20 pence, 20 pence. Where my money stops, let me come down. So we have this huge challenge. What kind of partnerships should the private sector be looking at? First of all, I'd like to say that we live in a world, we're now beginning to tend towards a world that's a lot more open-minded. As far as the government of Nigeria is concerned, and also the private sector, the point is that we're ready to get finance from wherever we can get finance. It's no longer going to be the Euro bonds and going to the usual channels that we've always been, some of which we've got into trouble with. If we have Islamic finance, $4 trillion worth and growing to tap into, of course, we've started tapping into it with the Sukuk, some of the bonds that we have done, and we're going to do a whole lot more. And we're now beginning to have a lot more, non-interest finance organization coming into the space. And, at this point, I'd like to just, hack back to what Professor Ajayi said. But the point is that, yes, Ajayi's bank may not be as large as an Access Bank for several reasons. But of course, like they say, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement and growth. We have Jais, we have Lotus, we have several other players. We have Sterling Bank has something they call the Alternative Bank. And funny enough, I was speaking with a friend, a former banker friend who was ex-Zenith. I was also in the banking sector a long time ago. And this guy, even though he's from the southeast of Nigeria and he's a Christian, he's actually shooting to get a non-interest Islamic banking license from the central bank. I was a bit taken aback, but this is what it is. He said, this is what works for me. So we're going to be seeing a lot more licensing in that area. If we're able to push back against those who would rather have the world being closed-minded. Nigeria today takes money. If we need financing, we take from China, from the Eastern hemisphere, if you like. We have Islamic banking. Islamic banking fundamentally and traditionally is not an aggressive kind of banking. Islamic finance is not as aggressive as some of the more traditional sources that we have. So therefore it's left to us. If we don't want to do something good, something that's asset-based, that grows our infrastructure, I'd say that we look more in this direction. But again, there'll be impediments, all sorts. I think just last week, some of my colleagues were going to host a halal goods, program that talks about halal export, especially. In the halal space, halal food, it's about a $3.5 trillion space. If we say the export aspect of it is about 20% of that, we're looking at close to $700 billion worth of export. I'm looking here, the countries that supply the most halal meat in the world, Brazil, $28 billion, India, $24 billion, US, $15 billion, Russia, $14 billion, Argentina, $12 billion, China, $10 billion, and so on. Most of these are not even Islamic countries. So Nigeria we were looking at, okay, how can we get into this space to challenge ourselves, to promote ourselves, to improve our productive capability as a country? And of course, some people brought the issue of religion, and so I think they had to postpone to try on another day, And of course, a few days later, we had Mr. Donald Trump saying what he said about Nigeria, trying to pitch us together. But I think we're far beyond that. Well, we're reasonable people. We know what our problems are. And I think even some of that statement from this gentleman is going to make us stronger. Like they said, he that is down needs fear no fall. If you say a country is now disgraced, the only thing that will happen is it starts to undisgrace itself. And Nigeria is rising, So we must avail ourselves to those partnerships. We must remain open-minded, okay? We must continue and ensure that whereas we're trying to meet up with those traditional financing sources, but we must retain the ethics of this finance source. We know the kind of things that happen with some of the other traditional ones. I'm not going to mention names, but the ethics of this, the fact that it's very genuine, it focuses on asset finance, it focuses on impact, is patient capital. Eventually, it's going to win. That's the truth. And it's not going to be because somebody believes in one religion or not. It's just about what is right for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fasua. I mean, it's important what you just said for us to really pay attention to it. Some of the countries that are utilizing these instruments are countries that you can't call Islamic countries. So it's not really about the religion, but just the understanding of the instrument itself and how that instrument can fast track infrastructural development across Africa. If you just think about what His Highness said around going granular, that we really need to go to where the help is needed. And so inclusion is really a critical element of Islamic finance. Just to ask Dr. Kwairanga, from your perspective around financial instruments that are being utilized, Sukuk, for instance, in Nigeria, how do you think financial inclusion can also be achieved utilizing Islamic finance?
Thank you very much, the chair of this panel. First of all, let me state that financial inclusion will achieve a lot in deepening our market. When you look back, the issue of the school you have mentioned, before I even come to that school, because we continue to mention school after school, but there are other instruments that we can be able to at least have under those perspectives. But we need awareness. We need to come together so that people will know the opportunities and the rest. Empirical evidence have shown, and historically too, Nigeria as an example, the population of Muslims is above 50%. And it has shown, based on that history, the majority of those, before the advent of Ajayi's Bank, Lotus Bank, and the rest, because of their faith, they don't want to associate themselves with these conventional institutions and the banks. But with the coming of all these banks, a lot of them now are one way or the other using the instrument of those financial institutions because they believe that Sharia compliance is non-interest, and that's what their faith have shown them. The same thing with insurance. Jais has been the one that have started, but like the way I've mentioned, like the way Khalifa mentioned, we have almost 4 or 5 licensed non-interest Sharia compliance banks. And the same thing with Takaful. We have Jais Takaful, we have Nur Takaful, we have Salam Takaful. These are all financial institutions that have come on simply because there is this platform that we do respect to other institutions started by Jais Bank. And the same thing with the other instruments that have come after those banks, especially the most talked about the Sukuk. In the 7th series of the Sukuk that the federal government have raised, they were all oversubscribed. People have gotten an opportunity where they can invest their own funds and they believe the returns they are getting, everything is based on their own faith. In addition to that one, we have institutions that today people will invest into. The NGS, Lotus, Islamic Index, the Jais Bank that are listed, and even most of the Sukuk that have been raised by subnationals and corporates. Today, we have over 1.3 trillion being traded of Sukuk on the NGX. And it will continue to grow because people have gotten that platform, people have gotten that opportunity to do that, especially with the fintech, with the investment that all the exchanges have been making. So a lot has been achieved in that area. When you look at organizations like Jais Bank today, it has given those who have invested in that instrument an opportunity that on daily basis, 365 days in a year, they can either wait from the TV stations or they will buy newspaper. They will know the value of their own investment. And it has brought issue of liquidity so that whenever people have an opportunity for funds, they have an avenue that they will go and sell those their instruments, which is being traded, which is very liquid in all the platforms we have. So this financial integration have gone a long way to achieve not only on the issue of the Sukuk, but by providing other platforms, other instruments that people can be able to come in and see how they can be able to benefit based on their own faith. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwairanga. So the financing of infrastructure gap can also be accelerated by going granular. So products like the Takafo, the Sukuk on the retail element can also help. Mutual funds that are Sharia compliant can also be instruments that can be utilized to fast track financial inclusion around Islamic finance. Thank you, Chairman, for that insight. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to open it up now to members of the audience to ask distinguished panelists questions around how Islamic finance can be utilized to close the financing gap that we find in infrastructure across Africa. So if you do have a question, if you could just put up your hands, I'm sure the ushers will get to you.
Mr. Chairman, let me just add a word on this issue of infrastructure gap that has been mentioned. I don't want us just to skip and state on only the issue of only school, because what comes to our mind immediately when you mention the issue of infrastructure gap, people, the first thing they will remember, they will know is issue of schools. But there are other instruments that we should take into consideration. We have the Islamic PPPs, which is the Ijara, all those partnerships, that people can be able to look at that. We have the private sector of Islamic Development Bank, the ICD, that provide those funding, that provide those lines. We had what the African Finance Corporation has mentioned earlier. He was saying that we are giving a line of, I think, is it $15 million and the rest, which have already grown. And those institutions, those financial institutions are being made so that when you look at infrastructure gap, like the chairman of the party have mentioned, over $200 billion in Africa, what the ISDB, Islamic Development Bank, provide to the member countries is almost 20% of that provided that. This is another way that we can be able to at least see how to bridge that gap of that infrastructure. And even like on the instrument, I've mentioned the platform I've mentioned for the NGX, for the Non-Interest Finance Board. This is a platform that people can use to come and respond so that at least they can be able to at least finance those infrastructure gap. So apart from school, there are so many other instruments, other products. But what really is the gap is the awareness. For people to know that there is these opportunities, there is those instruments that you can be able to utilize. Either you get a line. I can recall immediately when Nigeria joined the IDB, the first state that got that line or that got funding is Imo State. Imo State is predominantly Christians. So like the way Professor have mentioned, issue of non-interest finance, issue of Sharia compliance is not only for Muslims, it's for all faith. And we have seen when we set up the East Bank, about 30% of the shareholders are even Christians. Those are assessing all those funding. If Ajayi will mention those, you see a lot of Christians on that platform. So we shouldn't shy away to say that the inclusivity of Sharia compliance product is for all. And I believe we can be able to utilize that I already mentioned earlier. When you look at the Dubai airport, it was built through Sukuk. When you look at almost all the roads now that we can mention in Nigeria, the new roads, are being financed by Sukuk. So I think it's an opportunity for us to utilize this type of conference so that we can open our mind, share our ideas, see how we can utilize those instruments, especially those of the NGS. We have set up a technology whereby we have an NGS invest. Because what we have noticed, the gap that is there, majority of the people doesn't even have access. When you look at Nigeria with a population of over 200 million, when I've said that we have less than 2 million investors, retail investors on the NGS, it's something that people cannot even believe because we are always trading on those shares. But what we have noticed, the gap, is that people doesn't have that time. You have to invest in technology, you have to invest in resources so that people can use their funds so they can be able to invest. And it's the same thing with this Sharia compliance products, instrument. We'll all make sure that we can be able to put them through those processes so that people can be able to access them easily. And if we are going to even look at maybe the listing requirement and the rest, it's something that I believe the professionals are here can be able to pack it and bring it to us. We can be able to look at it. CBN, when His Royal Highness have mentioned, when they just support this Islamic Finance institution and the rest, it's not the same capitalization with the Access Bank and the rest. When Hajara set up Lotus Bank, maybe it's at the 5 or 10 billion capitalization. When you look at Access Bank and the rest, it's around 25 billion and above. So there is a lot of leverage that we can take into consideration, and I believe with our regulators' approval, we can be able to seek for all those other deferrals or to bring down the listing requirement so that we can be able to have more of those instruments to be listed. Thank you.
I get my mic. Alhaji Kwairanga, I salute you. Subhanallah. All right, now we need to quickly take questions. We can only take 2 for this time. Unfortunately, we are over 20 minutes behind schedule. Sir, I saw your hand first. Please, no long protocol or introduction, question only, and direct it to whoever. So first and the second, let me get somebody from this side. Okay, excellent. We only have one going once, going twice, one question. End of discussion.
My name is Professor Adam Abubakar, ASQ, Chairman of the Pension Industry Non-Interest Advisory Committee under Nigerian Pension Commission, PENCOM. Mine is in relation to the Sukuk issuances. As it is on records that, for example, for the past 3 years, the oversubscription rate of Sukuk issuances has been growing and growing year by year. For example, in 2023, We have in the fifth Sukuk up, we have about 356% of our subscription, while in 2024 we have 435, and recently of 300 billion, it was oversubscribed by 735%, which is to the tune of 2.1 trillion at the state in the records. Now, considering this oversubscription rate, what do you suggest to the federal government and other relevant stakeholders to do in order to absorb and increase the scope of these sukuk issuances? And secondly, how do we diversify? It is only the road projects that we're having. In other jurisdictions, we've seen how sukuk is being used to fund other critical sectors of infrastructure deficit in the rail sector, in oil and gas, in housing and others. What do we do to improve this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I learned there's one more question on this end. A lady, where's the lady that raised her hands? There she is. So please ask your question, then the panelists will answer in about 5 minutes, and then we're done with this session. Please, straight to the question.
Thank you. I'm Hafsat Umar, Company Secretary, Lal Takafu. So we've been discussing on Sukuk financing, but we've not seen how the regulators are working to bring in Takafu and re-Takafu to close in the infrastructure gap. What are the regulators working on that? Thank you.
So, Dr. Fasua, you want to go on the infrastructure gap around the oversubscription that we're seeing in Sukuk. What can be done to help reduce this oversubscription that we're seeing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whereas I'm not a capital market aficionado like Alhaji Kwairanga, but what I could just say off the cuff there, if you're having oversubscriptions, it means that you have a huge market that you're not tapping, right? So the issue then becomes what to do. What to do? Do more issuances, expand your issuances, right? More so because it is asset-based. Therefore, it's something you can touch. And we said that we have a huge infrastructural gap. So for me, why not if not? I mean, we've seen some organizations lending money to Nigeria for money to share for vulnerable people. Whereas vulnerable people need to be helped, but sometimes I am a bit hesitant to say we should borrow money just to distribute to poor people. Poor people, I would rather that money even goes through an agricultural program like they have in the US. There's something called the TEFA program, even up to this thing they called food stamps, which has now been renamed to maybe STEP or something of that sort. They would rather give food to the poor people than give them cash. Because you give a poor man, cash, and the guy, there's so many betting shops all over the place in Nigeria. So he probably wants to place a quick bet on who's going to win between Arsenal and who are they playing next week, and the money disappears. So the market is there. And of course, I discuss once in a while with the DMO. The concern, however, is Nigeria overborrowed? Do we have a debt crisis? If you say, listen, that's 7 trillion or 2 trillion over subscription, let's find a way of absorbing it if the rates are, if the arrangement is right. We're not even talking about rates now. Now, someone will say, oh, Nigeria is borrowing too much. But if Nigeria is borrowing to build this infrastructure, I personally don't believe that it is over borrowing. And of course, if you look at it, the truth is also that at less than 40% debt to GDP, we're under borrowed as countries go. If you look at our comparator countries in Africa, the Egypts of this world, the South Africa, Kenya, even Ghana, the least you will find is 7% debt to GDP. And with the kind of reforms coming up, even with the kind of revenue and tax reforms coming up, where those of you who are earning much more money than 50 million naira as personal income in a year, yes, you will have to pay a little bit more, maybe 2% more. But what we're doing is to ensure that those who are earning 1 million naira and below in this country, basic 80,000 naira per month and so on, are going to go tax-free. And also that MSMEs which are turning over 50 million and below, will not have to pay any taxes. That is your turnover, not profit, is 4 million naira and below every month. Nobody should disturb you for VAT or company income tax or capital gains or anything. They should leave them alone. So I think that the reforms are pro-poor in that regard. You know, while we focus on the upper one, already we're beginning to see a scenario where, our debt service to revenue ratio is improving. It used to be 120% as at 2022 December. 120% of our revenue was what we used to service debt. It has gone down to less than 60% as we speak, and it's going to get a whole lot better next year if some of the technology, assisted revenue collection strategies kick into place. So I would say that it's a great opportunity we have to dive deeper and to actually dig in with the available Islamic finance, non-interest finance that avail themselves to this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fasua. I think the last question is really around over-reliance on Sukuk. What else can we do from a regulatory perspective? I think Professor Ajayi, can you just expatiate on that? What else do you think we should be doing to utilize other instruments like the Takafu that the lady mentioned?
Actually, there's a lot more than Takafu. There are products, Tina, and so on, that are tied to infrastructure. You have concessioning, you have forward contracts, which is used a lot in the oil and gas industry. You have streaming, which is used in the mining industry. You have leasing, so you concession to build a road, you then do a lease, to maintain and operate it. All these are within the frameworks. So it comes down to this. Please don't look at the regulator. The regulator limits, in Nigeria especially. It doesn't enable. It should enable for the most part. And it's part of the colonial vestiges that we have that our regulators generally limit us. They're supposed to oil markets. But be that as it may, it comes down to one thing, which is what the market does. The market, those that are interested in alternative finance or banking, or non-interest finance or banking, or Islamic banking, should look at the market. They see that an issue is 700% oversubscribed. There are people that have a list of those people that did not make that subscription. What have they done to sit down to create a product? You should create a product which you would take to PENCOM and say, PENCOM, open up the window, because I don't see it in the list of what pension companies can put money in. I've created this product. Open the list, the money will be safe. So until we, in this room, as the chairman said, develop products, there must be products that this money will follow. And it's been mentioned, there are loads and loads of things that can be done. Why can't you go to a state government? Say, state government, your revenue is very low, but I look at your potential. I will gather funds for you to assist you to do agriculture or to do mining or to build roads in a manner that will create employment, will free your women, and reduce poverty. And until we begin to do that, we will continue to look at regulators, continue to look at figures, and we'll continue to fail ourselves. The last point I'd like to make, I'm not interested in taking money from abroad. We have enough money in Nigeria. Otherwise, an instrument will not be 700% oversubscribed. 700. It means the money is here. And so what we need to do is to look at the products that we will develop that will ensure transparency, because it must be ethical, transparency, and the legal system that will ensure that people live up to their obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We are out of time. I'm sure the background is really around the Prosperity Foundation, how Islamic finance can be utilized to finance the infrastructural gap that we find across Africa. And the distinguished panelists have done justice to that, starting from Dr. Kwairanga that talked about utilizing the capital markets instruments to be able to raise capital. Professor Ajayi talked around the framework, the legal framework, dispute resolution, and the use of other instruments away from the sukuk to be able to address this funding. And Dr. Fasua really talked around government commitment to this Islamic finance, just looking at the government of Nigeria and also calling on other African countries to utilize Islamic finance to find our infrastructural finance. It's not a religious core, because if you look at the list it showed, there were mostly countries that you would not consider Islamic countries, but are utilizing the instrument in an effective and efficient manner. That said, thank you very much, and I'd like you to put a resounding round of applause to our distinguished panelists.
Thank you very much for a very rich, insightful session. Please, could the panel... Thank you very much for a very rich, insightful session. Please, could the panelists stay on stage for a group photograph? In the meantime, we will be taking a break. It'll be 30 minutes because we really do need to get back on track with the timing. There are service-based 3 points that you can go and have your snacks and refreshments. As I said earlier, the loos are when you step outside, turn right, turn left, then first right. In the meantime, all our speakers, please, if you go this way, you will be led to the speakers' room where you can have your refreshments in privacy right outside this hall. Everyone else, you're more than welcome to go and start lining up for your refreshments. Thank you so much. I asked about prayers for those who want to say their salat, and Umahani said there is a place right outside that you can pray. So be aware of that as well. Please, we need to be back and seated by 1:30 on the dot. Thank you very much for joining us for this session.